So we are here to talk about 10 years of Throwdown and the many places that's going to take us. And so I'm not going to do big, long, paragraph-long introductions for everybody because I'm pretty sure most of you know who I've got sat in front of me here. But just to give you a very quick introduction, I've got Freya Bramble-Carter, an artist and potter and semi-finalist on season 2, you think? If we can remember correctly. And Keith Brymer-Jones, of course, a potter and designer and well-known judge on Throwdown, and Stuart, Carey, the founder of the Kiln rooms that some of you might know here in London, a lecturer, a ceramicist, and also a consultant on the Throwdown, helping to design some of those challenges. So thanks all of you for being on the panel. This was one of the nicest gigs I've been asked to do in recent times. And actually, when I was thinking about how to start this discussion, the thing that I'm always really interested to hear about, as a writer and a journalist, are these moments that people kind of met clay. Like, what is your origin story with clay? And you all come to it from a different point, from childhood through family, maybe a bit later on. So, Freya, tell me about your sort of origin story with this material.
Right. I'd say I first knew about it because my dad is a sculptor. So very simply, just a bit of osmosis, just watching and doing daily chores for pocket money. Bit of a child slave.
Did you get pocket money for Reclaim?
Yeah, I did the Reclaim with my twin sister. Seriously, it's a big job. So we used to do that on the weekends and stuff. And then I did art through my education, and I did a fine art degree. I have to make it very clear, I was not interested in being a potter. Very clear. I said, Dad, I'm not into this, yeah? I just want to make fine art. And I think I was a bit more conceptual at the time. But then when I left my art education experience, all I wanted to do was clay. So I kind of ran back to the studio. But throughout my degree, I found that I actually was always at the studio just learning, along with like my dad's students. I was just learning all the same stuff and teaching and helping, and did kids classes, and I just wanted to be there, opposed university. So it started from there, really.
Keith, tell us about your origin story.
Well, it's been kind of well documented, and I've said this many, many times before, but for those who haven't heard it before, I suppose it was 11 years old in the first year of secondary school. My art teacher at the time, Mr. Mortman, campus Christmas, brought us into the art room one Monday morning, and there was a lump of clay on everyone's workbench. And he extolled the virtues of clay in a very kind of dramatic way. The moment I touched the clay, I knew this material was going to be in the rest of my life, because I think obviously through years of therapy, I've discovered that basically I was probably subconsciously tapping into the fact that I'm dyslexic, and many of you will know that dyslexic people have a great affinity with shape, form, and volume. Well, obviously, touching clay and manipulating the clay, I think I obviously was subconsciously tapping into that dyslexic talent of being able to view and observe the world in this way. And I was obsessed, absolutely obsessed. I was in there morning, noon, and night. I was even in there during the lunch hour, after school, before school. I used to fix the kilns at age 13 on my own when he went off to the lunch hour. Yeah, different times, the 80s. Yeah, but I would be in there, and I was obsessed. I mean, for God's sake, I even bunked off school in the sixth form and used to go to the V&A and just be surrounded by pots in the incredible V&A galleries, and it was wonderful. And that was my first foray into clay. Wonderful, yeah.
Love that obsession that feeds through. Did you have a similar thing?
To be honest, it was fairly similar. I was 14 at school in Newcastle, and the head of our art department, Glyn Thomas, He was a potter, and every 2 years he would pick 14 names out of the 200 kids who wanted to do art for GCSE and take them off to do pottery. And as a sort of 14-year-old Geordie lad, I was like, pottery, like, I'm not doing that. But within the first hour, I completely changed my opinion on it, and I was totally hooked. And then the story's very similar to Keith's after that. Every lunchtime, after school, whenever I could get in, and the interesting thing was I was fairly academic. I didn't feel dyslexic at the time. I mean, looking back, maybe I was slightly, but that's a different story. But I just sort of, everything that I thought I was going to be sort of fell aside, and clay just sort of became the thing. So I went on from Newcastle to Glasgow, did a BA in Glasgow, which is a 4-year BA. It doesn't exist anymore, sadly. And then straight on to the Royal College. So I did 10 years from GCSE, A-level, BA, MA, all the way through before I even thought about selling a pot or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really interested in the way these kind of, this like passion and obsession seems to kind of drive so many people to this material. And that is what the show is really all about when I watch it. And I want to actually ask you all, one of the things that I didn't know, I kind of don't know how you all came to be on the show, because it is 10 years old now. And I want to go back and say, because you've all had different entry points into the show. And do you remember first being told about it and thinking, oh, is this a good idea? And yes, I want to be a part of it. Like, Keith, do you have a memory of how did you come to be the judge, and who approached you? And do you remember thinking it was a good idea, like this show?
No, it was a bloody awful idea. I mean, basically, I run a company called Make International, and we make and design ceramics for about 30, 40 countries around the world. But I mean, I'm actually a studio potter at heart, and started my career hand making ceramics for the retail industry: Heels, Habitat, Conran, Calvin Klein, and I would regularly make order runs of between 6,000 and 9,000 pieces, all by hand. That was my training, and then moved into sort of mass production. And under the guise of Make International, we did all these bloody stupid videos. And one of them is me dressed as Adele, I know, singing Rolling in the Deep, rolling clay with Keith. I know, it's very cheesy. And the only reason why that came about, and it's the beauty of algorithms and the algorithm of life, but my business partner had an aunt who had a mansion that resembled the house that Adele is doing the video in. That's the only reason why we did this video. And he said, you used to be in a band, you could sing, we'll get you in a dress, dressed as Adele, and we'll do this spoof. Well, anyway.
And you said, good idea.
I said, really? Anyway, before I knew it, I was in tights and stilettos. We did this video, and it was amazing because we shot it on 35 millimeter, which is really big screen stuff. So the production value is amazing, actually. And there's more bloody stupid videos of me as Sinead O'Connor and various other people. But this particular video went kind of viral. And at the time, we were working with this billionaire woman over in America who owned about 100 shopping malls, and we were thinking of opening KBJ stores in all these shopping malls. And she just happened to be friendly with a guy called Rich McKerrow, who was the head honcho of Love Productions. And he was over there selling the Bake Off, about 10 years ago. He was selling the Bake Off to various networks in America. And they had a breakfast brunch meeting thingy, whatever they do in America. And he basically piped up and said, look, I'm looking for a new format. I've done sewing and I've done baking. I should do a new format. And she pipes up and says, well, I'm working with this cross-dressing nutter potter at the moment and this toff from England, and they've done this video. And he literally went back to his hotel room in the US and watched the video, absolutely loved it, phoned me up from the US and said, oi, do you want to be a judge on this new program I'm thinking of putting together about pottery? And I thought, really, pottery? It's like watching paint dry, for God's sake. Because obviously we all here in the room probably know how long it takes to get from a lump of clay to opening that kiln door. But obviously with the power of editing, we've come up with a fairly decent program, we hope. But I must admit, I did have my reservations because, one, I wasn't into doing any car crash TV, and I said that at the time when Rich McKerrow and I met up when he came back to the UK. We met up after about 5 or 6 bottles of wine later. He convinced me that it would be a good idea, but also that he wanted to. I said, look, mate, I don't want to do car crash TV. I don't want to set people up to fail, especially when we have the lovely people on the show that are really passionate about what they do. You know, we can't belittle their passion for what they do, and also every week, you know, get rid of someone. But he said, no, I really want to extol the virtues of clay. And, you know, obviously within a mainstream television show, which is what it is, we try and balance the two together, showing and extolling the virtues of clay, but also doing this mainstream formatted show. And, you know, lo and behold, we sort of get it right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I want to ask about this maybe after I've sort of asked Stuart and Freya, but I think, you know, you're thinking about it, and I think the title of judge is almost like not the right word for what you do on that show, because you're sort of like, you know, as judges, you and Rich are almost like, you sort of hype men in one part, support on the other when things go wrong, and you're like, no, it's going to be okay, you can fix it. And like judge is almost too harsh a word for it or something.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. After I think it was after the series 2, production said, look, you've got to be harder. You've got to be harder on them. You've got to be more like, you know, you're fired kind of thing. You remember when all that was the rage, you know, really belittle the people, you get out. I said, no, we're not like that. Potters aren't like that.
I remember.
And you know what I mean? Thank God we weren't, because we're not, as Potters, we're not. They're the most uncompetitive type of person you could ever have as a formatted show. But it really works.
Even compared to Bake Off, I think there's a lack of competition.
Oh, God, they're always bloody helping each other. It's a nightmare. But no, you can but only be positive. Yeah. And fortunately, that comes through the camera and that comes across as the show. So it's wonderful, yeah.
Freya, we talked a little bit just earlier today, and I think when I was asking how you came to be on the show, you were sort of saying you'd seen the call out and you thought you were like, wow, this is great. This is what this industry or this kind of scene needs. Can you tell me a bit about how you decided to apply, and then what the experience of like joining the show was?
I think, I applied twice actually. I remember that when I first saw it air, I think I was just shocked and just blown away. I was like, yay! This is the best thing. I think I was just so happy and grateful, very appreciative that it was pretty random, but desperately needed. And I just remember thinking, this is just the best thing for this industry. A lot of the ceramics courses had shut down. And at that particular point, I had made the decision in my life to commit to learning the craft fluently, so that I could teach it and just share the beauty of this traditional craft. I think I was just really. I remember writing on my application form that I don't care if I don't get in. I'm just really happy that you're doing this, and then that was the second. And then I got in. I got in on the second time round. I was just, I've never had a competitive spirit in me. So it was, for me, the whole experience was a learning one, and it has been, yeah.
Yeah. And Stuart, you are sort of a consultant. You do lots of things on the show, actually. One of the main things is helping to design the challenges. But how did you come to join in that?
It's a sort of interesting story the way I've been working with the Throwdown, because I've only been sort of employed by the Throwdown, if you call it that. It's obviously very sporadic for me.
Employed.
Yeah, exactly. But only sort of on the team, if you like, since season 5. So we're season 8 now, so 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 4 seasons done, and we're starting work on the next one. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Too late. But right at the start, I remember group of the producers came to my studio. I had a studio in Old Street down the road at the time, and they were they knew, because before the Kiln rooms, I started Turn and Earth, and then I left Turn and Earth and went on to the Kiln rooms, and they knew Turn and Earth was starting, and they were interested in me because I had access to a lot of people. I was teaching a lot of people, and I think, it was a good place to start with people to apply for the show. It's important that people apply for the show as well, actually. And I was really defensive, and I was like, please don't X Factor pottery. We are At that point, there was I felt a palpable change in the marketplace pre Throwdown, that things just started to change. Natalie, who's now chair of the Crafts Council, was one of the original team at the New Craftsman, which was a fantastic gallery, and I was selling in, and they really boosted me. But what they were really keen on sort of doing was establishing handmade as a recognizable sign of luxury. So it wasn't necessarily about the brand name anymore, or about something being gold plated or whatever it was. It was about the integrity of it and how it was handmade, hand produced, and how it was produced. And I felt like we were just starting on the cusp of a wave that was growing to re-establish handmade craft in the wider sense, but obviously ceramics in mine, as a new interesting thing with some kudos, because it had been at the bottom rung for quite a long time, and people forget this a lot now. Just 10 to 15 years ago, the marketplace was completely different for ceramics. It was really not taken seriously as a craft. I remember when they were closing my course down in Glasgow, I went and painted in 8-foot letters "Save Ceramics" on the side of the student union, and somebody crossed it out and changed it to "Ban Ceramics, Save Tupperware," which was funny. It was funny, but it kind of summed it up. Like, people thought you were on the ceramics course because you couldn't get into anything else.
Yeah.
And I found that so offensive at the time. And then, so that made me so defensive when this thing was coming out that was threatening to change this evolving landscape. So, I was really, when we were talking about it, I was very, you have to do this, you have to be so careful with this, it's in its infancy and it's growing. And I was nervous about it, but they did seem to take it on board. And the first series was slightly different to the rest. I don't know if you remember, Keith, but that first series, there was a bit of background and a bit of history and things. And I liked that, and I understand why it's not necessarily there now. But that was, I think they did it. They justified their existence with doing that at the start. And
I think
things have to change.
That little bit of history, I think lots of people were really interested in, because there was it started a resurgence in people doing like evening classes where you're also not getting those little bits of history. So it played really well, I thought. Sure. Anyway.
No, I mean, when the first series went out, it was a real dark horse. They hadn't realised the response that it was going to get. I remember I did, in one of the second challenges, I did a plate challenge, and I did a plate with a mustard whirl, a rim. And the amount of comments we got from the public about, oh, that's how you make a plate. And it was this sort of, realization that things are made. I know it sounds strange, but, that things are made by hand, And throughout my whole career, I was an old school apprentice. And then I started my own ceramics studio up in Highgate, funnily enough, just up the road from here. And I was making for the retail industry. And throughout the 90s, that's all I did. I think the largest order I ever made was for Habitat back in the day. And that was 16,000 pieces, all by hand. And I was regularly making, 800-900 mugs a day on the wheel. But the price point for that was getting squeezed and squeezed. Well, now we have this show, and we have this awareness through amazing organisations like the Crafts Council, that awareness that things are made by hand, and that there's a personal quality to them, and an incredible skill in that skill set. Yeah.
I think one of the most amazing things actually is to watch somebody like yourself sit down and be like, yeah, here's a plate, and then everyone else who is at a different point in their learning journey has
Sure.
to sit down and try and make something. And there's always that, it looks amazing, you know, to see somebody, the flow of somebody on a wheel who has that muscle memory. And you think, wow, that looks so easy. And then you sit down and it's never that easy for most people.
No,
But that is
absolutely.
one of the amazing things. And I think that plays into what you're saying about an understanding of where these objects come from and the skills and the time, the learning time that it's taken to know how to make that. And I wondered if how that sort of thing plays into how you're making decisions or looking at the sort of builds and makes that you're setting on the show.
Yeah, I mean, after that initial thing, a lot of time went by, and then they came back to me. Kevin Millward, you know, he's not here tonight, but he has to be mentioned because he's my counterpart and he's done it from the start.
Yeah.
So he's like the most senior advisor to the show. So, and he'll forget more than I'll ever know. He's that knowledgeable about ceramics, and he's, you know, a Stokey, and he's lived there and seen the industry come and go.
I'm glad
and
he's
come
not
and
here
go.
though, because he talks for bloody England.
Yeah, well, I'm doing my best, Keith. But
I'm joking.
well, I've forgotten the question. now.
Sorry.
About building, what are you thinking about when you are designing?
Yes, yeah. So like Kevin was doing the challenges for a long time, and then he's, you know, knocking on a bit. He wouldn't mind me saying, but he wanted to take a step back. So they were looking for somebody. So they asked me to come in because obviously at the Kiln rooms, we've got a vast number of people coming through the studios and trying to achieve something in a relatively short amount of time, you know, and it's not like the constraints that you have on the show, obviously. But what we are becoming specialists at is being able to systemize things in such a way that we can guarantee the best chance of a good result.
Yeah.
And it's not a guarantee because I'm sure most of you in this room have done pottery, and nothing's a guarantee in pottery, God knows. But I think I was in a good position for that. And now, you know, with that experience, because the Kiln Room's turning 10 this year as well, and with Turn and Earth before that, I've been doing this kind of thing, teaching in my own studio for about 13 years. Kiln Room's got 600 people in it at the moment, in one guise or another. We have to make sure that things can work. So like that totally lends itself to how can we set these guys up to succeed rather than set them to fail.
Yeah.
And I think what you were touching on before about the quality of the kindness within the show, that's so true. And that's why, you know, Kevin still works on it and is still part of the team. He's been there from the start. But they wanted somebody extra in to make sure that we were really setting people up to succeed.
Right.
And that experience has lent itself in really well. So every challenge now, if it's the slightest concern, we test it before. So we send it out to people who we have been recommended to a similar level as what we might expect the contestants to be.
And they're tested, aren't they?
They're tested. We
Yeah.
test the challenges. You know, the shrinkage of the clay. Everything gets tested. We use predominantly electric kilns now, which in the past, you know, sometimes it was biscuit fired and gas kilns and
Yeah.
things, which can be fraught with, you know,
Complications.
issues. So, you know, there was some changes like that to guarantee a bit more safety, but then that allows us to play into the alternate firings a little bit
Absolutely,
more.
yeah. I have to say at this point that our tech team, him being one of them, are the backbone of the show. Without the technical team, the challenge team, as they're called, the amount of preparation that goes on for the show, during the show, before the show, and after the show as well. But without the tech team, the whole thing would completely and utterly fall apart. Many of you in this room will know how long it takes to prep a particular thing that you want to do with clay. Well, these guys do it all, and then it's just filmed. And with the power of editing, obviously, we can get through the processes. But without this lot, we wouldn't have a show. You know, it's incredible what you do, and the amount of preparatory work that goes in before we even get the camera rolling. It's incredible, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just have to say the team's names, so I feel like
Yeah,
I've done
sure.
it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Josie, who's the challenge producer, she does a fantastic job. She knows so much now. I'm not saying she didn't know anything at the start, but she really can talk in clay now, which she couldn't at the start.
Clay.
Yeah, it's been a fast learning curve.
She does the research and it seeds the ideas. We'll have like, a sit down and a good chat about what we think might be good fun. But you've got to be careful because, 10 years, you can't do the same idea again and again and again. How can you make it fresh but still touch upon, historical things and sort of contemporary at the same time and keep it relevant? So a lot of this starts with Josie before it comes to me. Josie will bring an idea to me and then I'll help. How can we make this practically happen in the constraints that we have with this being a TV show? And then, that's our sort of backside of it. And then we have testers. And then on site, obviously, we've had Rose for a long time. And now we've got the wonderful Princess, who's done a fantastic job this season. Yeah. She's been an absolute dream. And there's also Kieran, who works with Josie, and is Joe, who is unbelievable. He is the off-screen technician, so he's just as valuable as the on-screen technician, and he's there every day, day in, day out, doing all of the stuff in the background. And without those, and obviously Kevin as well, I've mentioned already, but without those guys on the studio floor, like there's no way it could happen.
No, absolutely. And just for your information, that when the Potters, I believe that the Potters get the main make challenges a good 3 or 4 weeks before we start filming, obviously, so they can practice them at home. Otherwise, we'd have ashtrays every week, and that would be terrible.
Only 3 weeks. That's not actually that
long. About 3 weeks, yeah.
It's a bit about 3 weeks ongoing throughout the process as well.
And the actual main make description and the brief for it is like it's like a legal document. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah. Because obviously, you've seen. I want to
ask Freya.
Because the pitfalls of with one particular make, you know this, don't you? Yeah. The pitfalls between a particular make are almost infinite. But we have to try and document as many possible pitfalls as we possibly can.
Yeah, and over the last sort of 4 or 5 years since I've been there, myself and Josie, and now obviously with Kieran as well, we're desperately trying to make the briefs as short as possible, so that the makers can understand the core values that we're looking for, but also give them the absolute points. You must hit this point, you must hit that point, the judging criteria which you guys get as well, that what makes this a successful challenge. And we're trying to put that all into something really succinct, but there's so much and there's so much thought, and then you have to think, what if somebody wants to do this or somebody wants to do that? So it becomes this whole spiraling thing. But I think we've come up with systems now and the way of working together that it's much more succinct, and we're able to sort of leave jobs to each other that we would all triple check before. Yeah,
Freya, what do you remember from those like making challenges? Because they are very different to the way you presumably make pottery outside of that situation. And do you have any makes that you made that either you have really happy memories of because they pushed you into a different technique, or ones that went completely badly that you have strong memories of from the show?
The toilet.
The toilet.
The toilet.
The toilet.
The bloody toilet.
I can't remember your toilet. What was your toilet like?
It did a little cascading waterfall over Kate.
Right. Yeah.
I remember at 3 a.m. the morning previous, me and Ryan went out to have a celebration, and we all got really messed up. And I was spewing, I was throwing up over this toilet, thinking, oh my God, I might have to make a toilet in the morning. And I thought, and I didn't do any revision. I thought, there's no way I'm going to stay in to make the toilet. And then I ended up having to. But I learned, loads of technical things. I remember it being to be honest, it was incredibly stressful. But I think I lost. But in a good way, I learned so much, and it was a bit like doing a ceramics degree. You get forced to do all the things that you.
It's like a crash course.
It's absolutely. It was a crash course, and we had such a beautiful friendship group. Everyone had a WhatsApp, and we continued that. I mean, we've still got the WhatsApp now, and everyone's just really good friends.
Yeah, it's interesting how, the studio that I'm a member of is kind of run by an ex-contestant. One of the ex-members is here. Like, there's this, and people stay in touch. It is like this, you build your own little community, and that seems to happen so quickly on the show. Even in the first few weeks, people are really upset to see people go because you're in this environment which utterly lacks competition.
I think you also have to remember that the material that we're working with, the essence, like the character of clay is like mother of the earth. And so I think it draws...
No, I think there was definitely something in that. Yeah, absolutely. That it's so primeval, it's incredibly tactile, it's incredibly sensual to use, and you can do almost anything with it. And I just want to say on the subject of the potters, by the way, no one on set, this is a little secret for you, no one on set, production or otherwise, are allowed to call the potters anything other than potters. They're not competitors, they're not contributors, they're potters. And it's that level of respect that we have from the cameramen, the sound crew, obviously Rich and I, even Siobhan. Is paramount to the whole way that we treat you lot within the pottery setting. It's incredible, and it's such an intense atmosphere that you can't help but bond with your fellow potters. Really, I mean, you've been up on set, and you've come up, and it's Judgment Day or whatever. It's incredibly intense, and the atmosphere, you could cut it with a knife.
I remember coming up on day 1 of week 2 after, somebody's just left and they're starting their new challenge. And they were all so down. They have a little potter's room where they take their breaks and things. And they were nearly crying. And I was like, God, you've only known him a week. He hasn't died. Lighten
What
up
do you
a bit,
think it
gang.
is
But it is
about?
true. It's so intense. It's because they're there all the time. They're in the hotel together. They're in the potter's room, as we call it, together, and then they're making the things together. It's very intense, and everybody's under the same pressure, and they all feel that from each other, and you become a support network. But I think it's such a natural potter's standpoint.
Yeah. Do you see those sort of? I think sometimes pottery can be quite a solitary experience. I imagine you weren't doing a lot of socialising, throwing 17,000 mugs, whatever it was, for Habitat.
No. There were days that I wouldn't talk to anyone.
And do you see people kind of get that thrill of being in a room with other people who are just as obsessed as they are with this material? Do you witness that when people join the show and when you start a new season?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I have that own personal experience because of Rich. I mean, Rich and I are total nerds. All we talk about in the green room is pots. Yeah. Cups of tea, and we just talk about pottery for 10 weeks. It's fantastic. Yeah, Siobhan can't stand it. But it's fantastic, yeah, because we all have this affinity with this material called clay. It's so expressive, it's so versatile, it's from the earth, and you can't help but, without sounding like a hippie nightmare, you can't help but extol the virtues of its properties. It's amazing. It's totally.
Well, it teaches you.
Sorry?
It's always teaching.
It's always teaching. I mean, I've been doing pottery for over 40 years now. I only say that because I can't count my age. But I still feel like I've merely scratched the surface. It's endless what you can do. And it's incredible. To the point where, I'll just tell you another little thing. The first series, I have to say, was a bit of a shit show. Because production hadn't realised how long things took to dry out, to cool down, to get out of kilns. We were filming till 12:30 in the evening, going, morning potters, starting a new show because we were trying to catch up. And on top of that, we had the stupid mistake of saying, right, this main make, you can make it in whatever clay you want. So some of them had different clays from the others. Well, I think we got through about 4.5 tons of clay throughout the whole series. It was a nightmare. And I only say that because it sort of describes the versatility and the variety of what you can do with the stuff. So, coming back to the challenges, that's why it's so important to hone it down and to get those challenges as simple and as concise as possible. Yeah.
Is there I'm really loath to ask you to pick out one, but is there a make or one that or one of many, I guess, that really sticks in your mind where you have been, we're blown away all the time. The one that was on Sunday with the fireplace.
Yeah.
That was just incredible.
Yeah.
But has there been any makes like that that are ones that for whatever reason have really, really stuck in your mind?
Well, yeah, there has been. And there are many for varying different reasons. But there is one in particular, and that was Christine's self-sculpture. If anyone saw me on tour, I'd bang on about Christine's self-sculpture all the time. And the reason why is because it was so amazingly executed at the time. In fact, ironically, it was one of the simplest of the forms that week. But it was so powerful in the way that she had managed to create it. And it stood alone. She didn't need to say anything to us. She plonked it on the judging bench. Rich and I looked at it, and we knew exactly. We knew exactly what she was saying. And it was through what she had made. And that is the power of ceramics. That's the power of art, let's face it. And it was brilliant. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was obviously crying, obviously. The film crew were crying. The sound guys were crying. They were even crying in the bloody gallery, looking at the monitors. And I was in there at the end of the whole day, exhausted. And I was looking at Christine's self-sculpture, and it was left on the bench. And there was only one other guy in the room, a guy called Adrian, who does the jib. And he came over to me, and he just went, "Mate, that's it, mate." He said, "We've got the BAFTA in the bag. That's it, we've got the BAFTA." We didn't get the BAFTA, but it was amazing. And it was the power and I suppose the surprise of what she'd created for us. It was amazing, yeah.
There is that thing, and I wonder if it's an engine or something that drives you all, and probably a lot of people in this room, which is the sort of impossible magic of what comes out of a kiln. You put it in, quite often you're putting it in a kiln, it's closed off, this thing happens to it, this transformation, and it comes out and it's an object that's going to last 20,000 years if you treat it right.
Absolutely, yeah.
And is that, those sorts of big, profound elements of working with clay, are they still really at the heart of why you do what you do, whether it's on the show, whether you're teaching, whether you're writing? What are those big engines that drive you?
Asking me. That's a big question.
Yeah.
Just say number 42.
It's a big, yeah, number 42. Do you still feel that on a day-to-day when you're
do.
sewing?
Do you know what? I think the interesting thing about clay is it's not easy necessarily, but you can fall in and out of love with it over time if you're taking it on as a career. And I think that's just an artist thing, not necessarily related to our material. But there's something so familiar about it, and that's not just as somebody who's been making it for years and years, but something so human and natural and instinctive about the material that, Freya, you were saying you were sort of brought up with it, and then you went away from it and you came back to it. I think once you're in it, it's very hard to even contemplate life without it. I mean, a lot of what you do now with the classes and things that you're doing is very instinctually sort of orientated around clay, isn't it?
Yeah, there's many aspects. There's like the physicality of making a structure out of clay, and then all the processes you take it through, all the machinery that you have to learn to use, and all the glazes and the minerals, and you have to meet all of this halfway with your attitude, your education, your knowledge and experience. And what blows me away 10 years later is just the emotions you have when you open a kiln door and it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, yes. Like, have my little dances. And then there's moments where I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, literally. But Yeah, talking about the workshop, I mean, I do standard pottery classes, but I'm also really excited. I'm working with my co-founder over there, Gemma. We do clay dance, improv, ecstatic dance, sort of tapping into the deeper levels of what that Mother Earth teaches us non-verbally as to why we're sort of naturally attracted to the material. So we're doing workshops on sort of a deeper dive level as well, and collaborating with different practitioners as well. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I often describe clay as a companion throughout my life, and it's seen me through the good times and also the bad times. And it is a companion. You do fall in and out of love with it, but it's something that you can't stop doing. It's part of you, and also I think it's so expressive in what you can make with it. It becomes part of your personality, which you can't deny, and that's something that's really stayed with me throughout my whole professional career. Yeah.
It's like when, like you're saying, sort of you just do turn into an eternal pottery nerd as soon as somebody starts talking about it, you're like, yes, and do you know how that's made? That's the thing, that's on the wheel. I find that, I only started working with clay 10 years ago, and I find that that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in. You're in.
My business partner, Ben, he, bless his soul, he's not a potter. He's had a go, but he's been doing it for 10 years now alongside me. And every time I say I'm going to do something like this evening, I say, oh, do you want a ticket? And once upon a time he would say, yeah. And I know we've had kids and things have changed, but now he's just say, nah, mate, I'll leave that one to you. He just knows, put me in a room full of potters and that's all we're talking about for the entire
Well, that's
evening.
great in a way. He's the business side, and you're.
Oh man, we work so well together. He lets
Fantastic,
me be good at what I'm good at, and he's fantastic at what he does as well. Yeah.
So I want to make sure we've got time for people to ask questions. So, but actually, what I want to ask you all maybe, and I think this applies to you all in different ways, but what do you see the legacy of the show as being? It's 10 years into it, I guess, with a little break, but there has been such a resurgence in interest in this. And what do you see that legacy as being, and on maybe the industry or the way people make art or feel they can?
I think from my perspective, obviously, like the first sort of open access studio that I opened in London was very successful, and it was literally opened just before this sort of boom. But what has happened since then is that it didn't spoil that crest of the wave, it increased it. And for me, if you're going to be in a position where you're into something that isn't doing very well, which, let's face it, ceramics wasn't when I was sort of coming out into it. It wasn't, but it was just starting to rise. You can't start something from the top. So I think there was a bit of a sort of negative vibe from some of the more established makers as to, this is TV, you're spoiling it kind of thing. But actually, there has been a rise of amateurism, and it's completely changed the marketplace. But what that has done is it's given birth to all these people who are interested in it, and they have access to it now because there's an interest in it. So places like us have opened up, tens of thousands of people have been through our doors, and we are one of now probably 20 just in London, probably 50 across the country. How many people have access to that material now because they saw it on TV for the first time, or maybe they touched it once in clay and they thought, actually, I'd like to do that. They Googled it, and all of a sudden there's a place on their doorstep. The localization of accessibility to this is really important. And I think, the benefit of that is beyond growing a marketplace. For me, that's good, because the more people have access to it, the more people appreciate it. And if you appreciate it, you can understand the value in it, which feeds the price side of things, which allows potters to be able to sell their work for a reasonable value. But it's also the individual benefit. So it's not just that like we're creating a much bigger marketplace for studios, for sales, for X, Y, and Z. Where I think clay is incredibly healing, and I don't go as deep into this as perhaps Freya does. She understands it better than I do. I'm quite simple in the way I think about it, but I think I've seen so many people come to it for the first time and walk away enriched and bettered for it. And I think, the cycle of the marketplace starting to grow and then the accessibility by having it in the living rooms of literally millions of people has brought people to a material that is revitalizing, energizing. It's a positive thing. And I just can't see a negative side in that, and
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful thing. I think we still have to be careful with it, but I know in the team that are on it, we're incredibly careful with it. And I think long may it last. I think the format, has been done a lot now, realistically. But I think there's legs in the throwdown, if I'm absolutely honest. But things will change, fashions will come and go. But I think at least what's happened is ceramics has been re-established, at least in the psyche of the general public, and we have an opportunity to continue that into the wider crafts and the longevity of it that people care about it, I think.
Yeah. Freya, do you feel that there's a legacy of the show on what you do and what you're able to do in your work in terms of, maybe when you started ceramics, again, was in a pretty bad place, and now you may be getting more students, but also in relation to your own work and the workshops?
Yeah, it's a completely different climate now, with the amount of studios and stuff. But I just see it as expanding and humanity evolving. So I think it will just keep pushing outwards, and people just get better at pottery, and we get better artwork and better artists and better humans and different types of stuff.
Those people who started, when you inspired them on the TV, who've now been doing it for best part of 10 years.
Oh, right.
They came out and they made their first mug and they were happy.
With me. They're exhibiting with me now.
Exactly. It's incredible. And the people were almost, some makers anyway, not everybody by any stretch, but some makers were almost offended by this sort of amateur making thing. Those people have started somewhere and now they're 10 years in. They've got the same length of time that I had when I was selling my work, and nobody would have said that to me. Do you know what I mean? And now they're at the top, and it's incredible how that's coming on. You can't start at the top; you have to start at the bottom. But we've had enough time now for that to translate into people. And if you went round collect, you'll see. I could point out probably 20 to 30 makers who I've seen at some point in their career doing next to nothing, and now they're in collect. I haven't even shown in collect.
It's impressive. Oh, have you not? You better come.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah.
Keith, what were you going to say?
When we first started doing the show, I think it was after the second series, I do trade fairs. I used to do trade fairs all over the world and this, that, and the other. And especially in the UK, potters would come up to me and they would say, do you realise I open my studio over a weekend and people come in and they pick up a mug and they say, 25 quid for this mug? I'm not paying that. He said, since the show has been on, people come in and they'll buy two and they won't even blink an eye. And whether that's conscious or subconscious, but people are beginning to understand the value in and the skill that goes behind per mug, said mug. And it's incredible. And, don't get me started. I've only had one glass of wine. But it's criminal. It's criminal that the arts, creative subjects at school have been decimated over years and years of cuts. It's criminal. And we're getting to a place now where people, especially in the private sector, if you call that this the private sector, if you like, people going to classes off their own back. But we need to get back into a psyche where our children need to be creative. Okay, clay. Obviously, I'm going to talk about that, but not just clay. All creative subjects. They need to get back into that, and we need to look at the education system to be able to monitor and understand that. It's not like ticking boxes. It's not like academic subjects at school. It has to be treated in a different way. And we have a left and a right side of the brain. And we have to look at education in the same kind of way. And I'm on various, I'm a patron of the NSEED, which is an organisation that support creative subjects at school. And again, a little secret, I got stuck in a room with Keir Starmer just before the election, funnily enough, up in Stoke. and I banged on at him about creative subjects at school. And I can tell you now, through various sources, but they are planning to bring creative subjects back into the national curriculum. I mean, wow, that's what we need to do. We need to do that. You know, because the thing is, when you buy one of her pots, or one of his, or anyone's pot, you're not just buying a product. You're not just buying that ceramic bowl or that ceramic mug. You're buying the years of skill and history that have gone into that. And when I first started training, and I started as a mere clay boy at Harefield Pottery, I said to my bosses at the time, oh, when can I start throwing on the wheel with you guys? I was 18. I'd done A-levels. I thought I was the bee's knees. I'd heard of Lucy Ree and Bernard Leach, you know. I knew it all. He said to me, I'll give you about 5 or 6 years until you can start throwing with us. And obviously, as an 18-year-old, that's the last thing you want to hear. But over 2.5 years, it took me 2.5 years to be able to throw with them in intense training. But here's the thing. When you learn something with your hands and with a natural substance like clay or wood or oils or glass, there's a value in that. There's a value in that time that it takes you to learn about that material. And you never stop learning. I have never stopped learning. And that surely is what we're all about. We have these. We're separated from other species because we have a thumb. And we are cognitive beings.
There are amazing potters without hands too.
There are, absolutely, yeah. But this is the thing. We need to value the materials and the natural substance like clay. And our children need to be able to experience. It's not for everyone, but that is, I hope, the legacy of programs, albeit mainstream entertainment programs. But that's the legacy of programs like this. That awareness and that national consciousness of bloody hell. That's amazing. And it's so expressive and so communicative what you can do with clay. Yeah.
And just to add on to the sort of expansion of the industry as this program continues, I just hope that from the top up, there'll be some lucrative financialness that trickles down into the industry so it is easier for
because we can talk about, really wanted to end on this note of this idea of creativity. It's really important, and hope that it does come off, that we start valuing tacit muscle memory knowledge as a form of knowing within its school systems. Yeah. But also there is a huge problem in, we didn't really talk about it, and it maybe is getting into the long weeds, but about the state of Stoke. We're recording the TV show there, but a lot of businesses in Stoke are really struggling. Another artist told me a story about, I was telling you earlier about, poverty and deprivation in Stoke is such a level. People are they're having trouble with people stealing scrap metal, which includes the braces around the bottle kilns. And without those braces, the bottle kilns fall down. And so there's like a very literal effect on the actual landscape and identity of Stoke on that deprivation and decline. And that sort of felt like this sort of moment, being told that fact. And there's got to be, we hope there's some upturn in that way as well, across the board, as well as in this kind of real amazing growth in that sort of amateur to professional in the middle spaces that's really fruitful and amazing.
Yeah. Well, touching on what Stuart said about, people starting from the ground up, we're going back to the Victorian era where the arts is just for the haves and not the have-nots. And we can't have this two-tier system of creative subjects within our education system because, one, we're denying many, many children an opportunity and a pathway to do a creative career, but also we're denying our nationality and our economy of all the swathe of people that we're not tapping into with all this incredible creativity and talent. Some people, they're always going to make ashtrays, but others But others are going to do something really incredibly special, and not only in special, but enhance the economy as well as our mental health. And I'm moving up to Wales at the moment, and I have a huge studio up there, and I'll be taking on apprenticeship schemes there. That's the way I learnt, and they'll be starting literally from the ground up. And Marge and I are starting a charity to then finance them into setting up their own studios. And that's got to happen. It's got to happen across the board. The national psyche has got to change from creative subjects being a step back, a Tupperware. It's not an alternative. It's just a different way of going on a career path. Absolutely.
I agree. Here. So I want to give you all a chance to just quickly mention, before we have time for a couple of questions, anything that you're working on now that people can look up. Have you got exhibitions coming up? You've got an apprenticeship scheme coming up. Freya, tell me what you've got coming up.
Yeah, apprenticeships. I think they're the best. I mean, especially with neurodiversity. We have a couple of apprentices, especially Princess. My dad taught her for the past 6 years over lockdown. But that was all just a time exchange. And then we have an apprentice now who's actually following a legal system, adopt the bottle. So we need more things like that. That's really, really good stuff. I mean, look how successful it's been.
Can you announce what are you allowed to announce what you were telling me about before in terms of the workshops and things you've got on?
Yeah, we have. I'm doing one. Chicago Expo is next month. I'll be shipping a whole load of stuff to there. But at the end of this month, me and Gemma are going to Bali to do a pottery and yoga retreat. Not to do it ourselves. We're hosting it for about 8 potters. And we've been doing these for the past 2 years. And so we'll also be going to Italy, Portugal this year. And we've done all the research, got these beautiful spaces and studio spaces and built good relationships so that we can be trusted in these studios for weeks at a time. But we really just dive in deep. And then I'll be doing a retreat for myself for 6 weeks at Villa Lena in Italy. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but I'm super excited about that. And that body of work will be in collaboration shown at Christie's with some other artists. And then, it's a busy year, and then we've got something in Panama. We've got this private island in Panama where we're going to do our finale retreat with Fiesta Gates. So I'm really excited about that. So we're just on the brink of we've just confirmed it, and then we'll just start organising the structure of how that's going to go. But super excited about that. Yeah.
Keith, you're in Wales.
I'm in Wales. Yeah. Do we or should just
Actually,
give
it's
them
just
right?
as exciting. Tell us about what you've got coming up that people should know about.
Basically, we're almost moving in. We should be in there in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and then it's hell for leather to get the studio set up, and then then start the apprenticeship scheme. And it will be a working pottery. The irony being that I'll be able to get back to hand making. In a serious way, we'll probably produce anything between 2,000 and 3,000 pieces a week. It'll be handmade, and we'll do one-off things. We'll do open studios up there, where the studio will be open for various times of the year. And also we've got a massive other hall. Of course we have. We've got 2 halls, and the other hall will be a community space where we'll be putting on ceramic exhibitions, folk exhibitions, lots of different things going up there. So I'm going to be very busy in North Wales. Yeah.
Sounds great. It looks amazing, the space. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Stuart, what do you want to plug?
I had my first solo exhibition in 7 years in November there. The work is still available from Maud and Mabel, who's a gallery in Hampstead. I'm having my TV debut this week. On Thursday, I have taken over from Florian Gadsby as the ceramics mentor on Make It at Market. So that's this Thursday, the 6th, and the second episode that I'm in is next the following week, which is the 12th, I think. Two really interesting potters that I've been helping on their journey a little bit. And then at the Kiln Rooms, we're having a ceramics festival this summer, and everybody is very welcome. It's a philanthropic reinvestment in our studios, our members, and the wider ceramic community. Everything is absolutely free. We've got guest speakers. We've got 6 slots for guest speakers. So far, we've got Kate Malone. We've got Rich Miller is doing a talk. We've got William Cobbin. We've got Florian is coming to do a talk. We're having a panel discussion, which is going to be chaired by the lovely Natalie here. I've got Sarah, this is news to you, Sarah Myers-Koff is going to be on the panel, and so is Maham Anjum, who just gave a plate to the king, which was pretty cool. And we have all of our members exhibiting, and we're having a really interesting charity exhibition, which is everyone who's contributed to our lectures. So we have a lecture once every 1 or 2 months in the studios. Everyone who's contributed over the last 10 years has been given the opportunity to contribute to an exhibition. So rather than ceramics, which would be very hard to organize, as I'm sure a few of you know, we've invited them all to make a sketch. So we've got so far 35 contributors who are all top-end potters contributing a sketch, and that's all the profits from that will go to Fired Up 4, which is an incredible charity. If you've enjoyed this evening, the tickets were only 12 quid. Stick another £5 in for Fired Up 4. You can donate on their website. They're bringing clay to young people, particularly in I hate saying deprived areas, but I can't think of a better way of putting it right at the moment. But there's some really interesting facts about Fired Up 4. I don't know if you know very much about it, but they've got 8 centres at the moment that they're part of, their youth centres. And since those centres have opened across the country, crime levels in, I think it's 13 to 18-year-olds, or potentially starts a little bit younger, has dropped by approximately 75% in every one of those youth zones, which is just incredible.
Almost as if that sort of thing works.
Yeah, you might think so.
I know, who knew? Shocker.
Yeah. So we're investing into those as well.
Amazing.
So that will be starting at the 5th to the 8th of June in 2 of our studios in Peckham, and watch this space. There'll be more to come on socials.
Great. Thanks very much, everybody. So we have overrun, which I thought would happen because I've got these 3 amazing people on the panel, and there's a lot to talk about. Potters in a room, it happens. But has anyone got a burning question that they want to ask any of the lovely panel members? There is a roving mic. Oh, yeah. Okay, at the front first. I'm going to go front, back, that side. Yeah. Yes.
So I've been doing pottery since I was very young. And obviously, you guys kind of speak about how you become obsessed with the material and everything becomes about clay. So even when I go on holiday, I'm always looking at art galleries and other, even shops of what I can buy and other people's pieces. When it comes to my own pieces, I always gravitate to sort of the cheapest materials possible. So I'm always using earthenware and just whatever, recycling. It's sad, but I go around to my local paint cafes, and if they have hard clay that they're not going to use and they're going to throw in the bin, I'll recycle it and use that. What's your favorite clay and why?
Good question.
Go on, Stu.
I am a big fan of smooth white stoneware. I think
What type?
I will use pretty much anything. I used to use Earthstone Extra Smooth for anything relatively small in scale, and if it got a little bit bigger, I would use the original, which has got a little bit more grog in it.
KBJ stoneware, you need to use that.
Yeah. Kevin, KGM. Kevin, I don't know his middle name. Begins with Gerard, let's say. Kevin Gerard Millward is the KGM. It's very good. That's a really versatile clay, actually, because
we use a lot of that on the show.
Yeah, it starts at earthenware. It'll fire all the way up to 1300 plus. But I use pot clays primarily. I use the special white stoneware or the Dracot. It's cheap. I really don't mind. I think if you learn to use material really well, you can get away with quite a lot, actually. And yeah, porcelains you have to be a bit more careful with. Like I'm not going to say which ones I hate because I think it's unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah, paper porcelain. Yeah. It depends what you're doing with it.
Keith?
Yeah, so, well, throughout my career, I've used various clays, white earthenware. Used to do a lot with white earthenware, royal porcelain from Valentine's. I've now got my own recipe, which is KBJ stoneware from Valentine's. KBJ, yeah, you got to try that.
Let's rub it.
Yeah, I'm on a percentage. But no, KBJ stoneware, which is basically very, very similar to the throwing body that I used to work with when I was a trainer. It's a very good throwing clay. But yeah, I mean, as Stuart said, you know, I do use a school buff stoneware. Yeah, because you know, if you fire it high enough, you can get some great reactions with the glazes. You know, there's lots of shit in it, which comes out through the glazes, which is brilliant, amazing. You get all these carbon spots, and it can really add a bit of texture. And so it really does depend on what you're making. But yeah, I'm a thrower, so a nice white cream KGM or KBJ, a nice stoneware body. Yeah, really, yeah.
Freya?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not really a clay snob, but when I come across the clay I can't stand, I suddenly am. So, but I generally will use a stoneware, and to be honest, all the reclaim that the studio, all the hundreds of students that use the clay, I just use the reclaim because I find it's been worked through and it's got that elastic, it's just got a good feel to it. And it tends to be a Valentine's B17C stoneware or VG9. But yeah, we use earth stone. But yeah, lots of different types of stoneware. I find porcelain, I mean, we love the porcelain because we like how the glazes run off that smooth surface, but you can just paint the pot in porcelain slip.
I was doing some work for Marks and Spencer's once, and I made 1,200 chocolate pots for Marks and Spencer's, and the whole bloody kiln overfired in porcelain, and they were all gone. That was it, all gone. That's a kiln door you never want to open, I tell you. But
the worst story I ever heard about, when I was writing the book, I was reading about people building their own kilns, and somebody had built a kiln, and it was a particular firing. It wasn't raku, it was something else. And he opened the kiln and he was like, oh my God, this is the best. This is exactly what I wanted. These big pots, completely beautiful. And somehow, and then when he touched them, they all shattered into a million pieces. And somehow they'd held together throughout the whole firing. This quite intensive firing. I think it was a wood firing. Anyway, and then he opened the kiln door and everything was still perfectly intact and perfectly fired until he touched it. And they turned to dust. Anyway, horror stories. Brilliant. Next question at the back. You were just here, yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm interested in how you incorporate heritage and at-risk skills into challenges on the show. Context. I'm an amateur potter at the Kiln Rooms, but I'm a 9th generation Stoke-on-Trent potter. And so watching those, incorporating those kind of traditional skills in on the show has been really meaningful for me and my family. And to see Stoke treated with that kind of dignity has been really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, the Staffordshire Flatbacks was a great challenge. Obviously, recently we've done the bird baths, the 100 years of Stoke's history. Well, not Stoke's history, but centenary celebration of the Stoke becoming a city. And yeah, we love all that, don't we? So, Stu, get your thinking cap on.
I think it's not just it's not just from what I see. It's the team behind this. It's not just the clay side of things. It's the planning side, and I think paying a little bit respect is slight homage to Stoke and the history of it. And
absolutely,
even the fact that it's filmed there, realistically there's no reason for it to be there other than it's a great location, it looks cool, and it's got the bottle kilns. It could be filmed anywhere because it's TV, but actually,
it does add extra credibility, though.
It does, but I think that is like integral in the show, isn't it? It's like we treat the potters with respect, we treat the industry with respect, and we really have to use the history of ceramics to come up with these ideas, because otherwise we haven't got anything.
It is all
Yeah,
real. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, why not, if you've got a platform, why not celebrate the craftsmanship that we have in this country, because it does still exist. It is in decline, very sadly, but the more we can sort of give it a platform and celebrate it, the more likely it is to be re-energized in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. And we had one more over here. You can put your hand up again.
Okay, so two, one serious one trivial one. The serious one is what are the selection criteria and process for the potters to go on the show? And the second one, which is trivial, is who chooses the fantastic music?
Yeah, right.
Selection process works that you can apply online, and you will be your profile will be looked over by the team. The key criteria is that you have to be able to sort of complete a challenge successfully, and that you won't go out in week one. And also, at the other end of the scale, you can't be making it's an amateur competition, so you can't be making your primary income from selling your work. So if you're making pots on a daily basis and selling it, then that's deemed sort of unfair in comparison to the other group. So obviously, throughout the series, we've had people who are very well trained. We've had people who've done a BA in ceramics,
Yeah.
and people like the guy, I've forgotten his name, but the guy who won the first series, I think, or was it your series with the white dreadlocks?
Oh,
What was his name?
Matthew. Yeah.
Yeah. His parents have been teaching
Yeah.
ceramics for a long time. He'd
Do
been
you know
brought up in it.
Matthew cycled 30 miles every day to get to the studio at Middleport. Every day. He hadn't told, he's a teacher, and he hadn't told his headmaster that he was on the show. I remember that. God, talk about dedication. Yeah, it was mad. Yeah.
Love him.
But I just on that subject, I just want to say on that subject, it's so incredibly hard to let someone go on that first week. It's terrible. It's awful. It shouldn't be allowed. And actually, this series,
It wasn't.
It wasn't allowed.
Take a bow, Andrew.
We actually put our foot down. Rich and I actually put our foot down because it was so hard to actually differentiate between who was going to go and who was going to stay. And we just said, you know what? You know, because we get often we get comments about saying, "Oh, can't they all stay in?" Well, yeah, but think about the budget and think about the editing, and that's the reality of a mainstream television show. But it's so incredibly hard to let someone go because, as we all know in pottery, you can open that kiln door and not expect to see what you wanted to see, and yet the next week, it all works for you, and it's incredible, and it's so hard to let someone go.
I think without giving too much away, there's the process of, your application will be reviewed, and then there's a phone call from a member of the team, and then that moves into a Zoom audition, which used to be held live, but that's like a sort of meet the maker sort of scenario. They tell you about your work, and I'll quiz them down on their skills. And then there's a live audition as well, where we bring the cameras in and see how people react to the screen, because that works two ways as well, because if you're all of a sudden this camera's in your face and that's the way it's going to be for up to 10 weeks and you hate it, then that's an opportunity for you to say, actually, this isn't really for me. But what it is more than anything is for us to see that those people are, A, on a personal level, going to be able to survive that process without it detrimentally affecting them, and B, they're going to be able to compete with each other, because we don't want somebody who's barely able to throw a cylinder versus somebody who's been doing it for 15 years.
Absolutely.
There has to be a level, but that also has to be within the group, if that makes sense. So we're not just picking individual potters, we're creating a group that stand a chance against each other and, obviously are representative and diverse. And
you could argue that has played out very, very much so in this most recent series. We've got 3 people that have all had Potters of the Week 3 times, and they're in the semi-final, and it's a very, very even Stevens. It's incredible, and it makes Rich and I's job extremely hard. But coming back to the challenges, that's why it's so important that we have a very, very strict judging criteria. And sometimes doesn't always, it's not always agreeable to the viewing public what we decide, but we have to stick to the judging criteria. And that is our first and foremost, as judges, we have to do that.
At some point, you have to really dig down and generate some form of competitiveness, basically.
And of course, who
I
brides
guess.
us really helps,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah.
But in
have to
terms
be
of the
able to know-
music, your trivial question, I've got absolutely no idea.
Oh, well, I'll
Do
tell you
know?
on that. Whatever's the cheapest through copyright. Yeah, basically. We have a very, very small budget for music. And the lovely exec producer and the production team have to sift through what's cheaper than other things. And fortunately for us, there's quite a lot of things in the 60s now that aren't in copyright. So it's brilliant. Yeah. So there you go. There you go. That's right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. So if anyone has one last burning question, we are quite over time now. Yes, let's have one more, and then we are going to let you all go and actually touch some pots, which I actually think nobody gets to touch enough pots. They're always behind a vitrine in museums, so I'm excited about this. But yes, the last question.
Oh, hello. Thank you for the talk today. I have a bit of a personal question. So I was a hobbyist potter for a while, and then I start to get injury, and then last year I get diagnosed with chronic illness. So I stopped doing ceramics as my hobby. But I really miss that primal interaction with the clay. Really miss the cold feeling of the clay when you're just squeezing. Anyway, I'm curious about if you have any similar situation around you have overcome this type of physical difficulties to interact with a clay, not necessarily physically, but I'm wondering if you have similar cases.
Well, I've done lots of personal sort of one-to-one learning with students that have maybe severe learning disabilities or even just ADHD and autism. My technician of 16 years is autistic, and he's the best skilled. He's more skilled than me. So I think clay teaches the body that the body can heal. And maybe there's something to be said just by interacting with the clay on a regular basis. You can heal without a therapy session, but just by playing and learning the techniques and learning what it has to teach you and stuff. I do think it changes personalities. My Romy, one of my apprentice, her behaviour psychologically has changed. I think her whole character, as he was saying earlier, her whole character's changed. She used to walk in, having really sort of neurodiverse behaviours and sort of spasms and stuff, and they just slip away, over time. It's just, I think clay is a very allowing medium, and it does things energetically as well.
I think from my experience, because obviously we have a vast number of people coming through our doors in different capacities, I think, I don't know your personal details, obviously, but I think finding the new normal for you is really important. We have people with, learning difficulties, as Freya's touched upon, but also a multitude of physical difficulties. We have a quadruple amputee who's taking classes with us at the moment, which you can imagine the challenges that sets up. But the mindset of that person coming to the studio is that they're going to find what their limitations are and be able to produce what they can produce. And I think it would be very easy to step away from something that you love because of a physical change in you. But you have to somehow find the new normal and find your new limitations and what you can achieve within that. One of my mentees, if you like, on this new show, the Make It a Market thing, she's blind. But the way she sees clay is fascinating, you know, and it's finding your route through the material to be able to produce what you can produce. And actually the value in that story is probably more interesting to a huge swathe of people than, you know, another person making a mug. And I'm not slagging that, because as many people can make mugs, fantastic. But if you have a different story and a different approach and a different start point, then the value in your work is going to be that you've been able to create that despite or including, you know, your ability or disability therein.
I would also say one of the things I think we were talking about, I think with your business partner Gemma, is like there can be a pressure to produce, even if you're an amateur potter, to make something that you know, if you've gone to classes, you've got to show, oh, I've made good use of that money I spent on those classes. But actually what we're all talking about, what we're all so passionate about, is actually just contact with that material. And if your new way, I don't know if this is relevant to your circumstances, but you don't have to produce anything. You can do whatever you want with that clay, and that clay can exist in lots of different forms. You know, it's liquid, it's solid. You can fire it in all these different ways.
It's just
and
your
the
own
contact.
personal process.
Yeah. You know, I wrote about an artist who did an amazing piece where she bathes in like a hole in the ground and like rubs the clay all over her. And it's incredible, you know, why we don't have to be making mugs or doing any form of studio pottery. This is literally this material that can hold our visions, and it has always done that. And so, you know, there are so many ways to engage with that material. And it doesn't have to be to finish anything.
Exactly.
Ever.
Start without an end goal, perhaps. And if you love just the sensation of it, just let that be enough to start with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Put all your reclaim in the bath, get in. That's fine.
At the weekends.
Yeah.
At the weekends.
On that note, we're talking about touching clay.
We just want to roll in it, basically.
Yeah, the mud bath.
Marge, it's Friday night.
Yeah.
Let's get in the bath.
The mud bath's at the back. Crafts Council, reclaim bath. Tactile Fridays. I'm going to wind this back now. Thank you so much for all of your questions. Actually, it's always so nice to have a bunch of potters in the room. I always love having discussions when there's like people interested in clay and pottery in the room. They're always this like really warm feeling. I love it. And thank you so much to all my panelists for being brilliant and for talking so extensively and inspiringly about this material. Can you give them all a round of applause, please?